All right, Martin. I want to start with something, and I didn't give you any of these questions in advance, but I want to get your thoughts on vibe coding, and specifically, I don't know if you've seen this. It's string.com, so String Alpha. It's through Pipedream, and you can vibe code AI agents. And I just wonder if you have any opinions on vibe coding in general, or about specifically about vibe coding agents.
I think vibe coding is definitely a useful tool for building something, let's say, quick and dirty, right? Especially as you're trying to experiment with things, AI agents including. I do think that if we are talking really meta, like how do we make sure the technology actually helps your firm? A lot of the solutions that at least we are working with firms, even very large firms, is quite more mundane than that. All right, it's simple things like, okay, how do we actually make sure that data flows in between systems correctly? How do we make sure that we can actually run proper reports on the data that we already have in our CRM, and maybe the CRM doesn't have the reporting capabilities we need? How do we set up, let's say, simple automation to actually like make stuff happen? So vibe coding, I would say it's a cool tool to develop something that's actually enterprise ready. At this point in time, I would be quite dubious about that.
That's a really good point, because yes, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, I think, because string. I'll just pick on string.
Sure.
And I do think you're right. I think it's what I think the value is maybe with something like string.com is that you can test out some ideas and test out some concepts, and then go build it out somewhere else if you need to. But it it's kind of hard to take something that you vibe coded and then fit it into this overall system of processes. And that's where a lot of the issues are. So how do you, let's say you've got one of your customers, and they're like, hey, I want to build this thing out, right? How do
Yep.
you make sure that that fits in with the overall system of processes that the firm has?
Well, I think first of all, it's looking really where, first of all, understand actually all of steps in the process, right? A lot of times, let's say if we are actually talking to, let's say, the firm owner, right? They'll say like, oh yeah, this is done like step A, step B, step C. And then we talk to the actual person who is doing the job, maybe like the paralegal or the clerk, right? And they're like, oh, actually, there's like step D, step E, step F, step Z, right? So first of all, really like making sure that we map out the full process that we are working with. Ideally, have some kind of diagram. I mean, there are a lot of tools, great tools on there like Figma, etc., where you can diagram out the process. Make sure that everybody who is involved in the process kind of agrees to that, right? Because that can also be sometimes an issue if the firm doesn't have proper SOPs, right? Or those SOPs are not necessarily enforced. Process may look different from person to person, right? So making sure that everybody's aligned and the stakeholders, then understanding how, let's say, the data flows, right? Where do we get information from? Do we call up the clients, ask the information? Do we have it in the case management system? Do we have it in a file, but it's, let's say, it's not uploaded to the case management system? And then design a workflow really around that. Understand like what data needs to be entered into the systems, right? So we can then actually make some use of it with automation, with AI, whatever we're utilizing. And then after we have that in place, understanding where can we actually apply automation and what processes can be automated versus not, right? And the decision there would ultimately come down to, let's understand the full capabilities of the software that we are using already, right? So say, case management system, Clio Manage, right? Recently they released automated workflows. You can now apply task lists on stage changes, right? In the case lifecycle. Understanding we have that native functionality built in, or do we need to build something extra using a platform like Zapier, Make.com, or something more complex than that?
Yeah. Do- I wonder if you have any advice for people that I'll give you a little story, and then maybe you can give me some advice on this. Where whenever I first started as an attorney, the firm I worked for, they had like their own kind of basic templates. They were somewhat uniform, but I know that each of us attorneys had our own set of documents on our own computer that were kind of our own little templates, and like the receptionist had her own, and the paralegals had their own, and so they weren't in like this joint database where everyone was using them. We had kind of had like the general documents that kind of everyone sort of had modified to make their own. So when you go into a firm like that, where like they don't have any like systems or processes, it's nothing's all integrated. do you have any advice for people on how to, when they're starting to build out these processes, like how do you take all these individual templates and all that and try to blend them all into one unified system?
Yeah. I think ultimately here the problem is not necessarily a technical problem per se. It's more of just an operations problem, right? And a human problem. And making sure that again all of that knowledge is centralized. And ultimately I would say the solution here is quite simple. It's just like make sure that whoever is doing a particular job, they sit together, right, in a room on a Zoom call, right, and walk through exactly how to do a particular function, right? After we agree on that, again, we can use maybe some diagramming tools, whiteboard helps. Then take those documents, right? Take that process that we've just outlined and put it in a simple SOP, right? Inside of Google Drive or OneDrive or whatever you're using, right? Or your server. Ultimately, I think in terms of knowledge management as well, it's kind of a big thing. There are a lot of programs out there that try to do, say like, okay, we're the best knowledge management system. We also now working on that internally. We've tried a few of those and we just said, okay, we're going to use Google Drive. We're going to have Google Docs with those processes that has version control. We can share it with everybody. Nobody needs extra accounts. And actually, Gemini connects directly to Google Drive. So you can just say, add Drive. What is the process for setting up a new client account? And it will search all of your Drive and pull up that answer. And those answers were better than the custom platforms that we were paid, $20 per user for. So I would say simplicity and like first of all, making sure that everybody's on the same page in terms of just conceptually, right? On an operational level, and then not overcomplicating and not over engineering it and just putting it on paper and making sure that at least say the human process is well defined.
I think what you just said I hope people don't overlook what you just said, because that is such a really simple, cheap hack. And I think it might be, ultimately it might be better than what everyone's been trying to find for years. Where like they want to have this like unified system where like you can find all the documents, all the SOPs and everything. But I remember when I started, all of our SOPs were on a Google Doc. There's like one Google Doc, and if we had continued to build out in Google Drive, I mean, we could be doing what you're talking about now, where like you just go to Gemini, ask questions of it, and we'd probably be better off at this point. So I think that's a really, really good hack.
Look, I over my career, I've been this for over like 5-6 years now already in developing the solutions for law firms. We've built very complex systems on Zoho, like the most about like 50 different steps in between 100 different flows. And what I realized that ultimately, those systems are amazing, but you need to know when is the right time for those systems. Like controversial opinion, until your firm is 20, 25 people, honestly, technology is not your biggest bottleneck. Your biggest bottleneck is getting people on the seats, making sure they can actually deliver the work, and you have good customer service, you have some standardized SOPs, but really technology is not the biggest bottleneck. Because if you have three people on the team, if you increase, let's say, process efficiency by 20-30%, well, that's still not even like one full-time equivalent, essentially, right? If you hit a team of 100 and you increase efficiency 20%, that's like adding 20 more people to your team, right? So those let's say benefits really start increasing as a firm grows. Until you reach that point, your problem are human problems, not technology problems.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When it comes to before the show, we had a little meeting and we were talking about prompting. And will you talk a little bit about prompting and how just prompting effectively can change the output substantially?
Well, first of all, I think utilizing AI, I mean, considering what I said before, right? Utilizing AI is actually a very quick win that firms can adopt in terms of technology to actually quite significantly increase their efficiency. Because let's say if you learn how to use tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude properly, you don't necessarily need to integrate already all of them into your process and like build complex agents or complex workflows that API calls, whatever, right? You can just use the tool effectively. And even if you just do that, in select tasks, you can increase your efficiency by 30-40%, but most importantly, actually increase the quality of the output, right? Make sure you don't miss any details that could be overlooked, for example, by a human in, let's say, a personal injury case, right? Make sure that your argument is as solid as possible. So by making sure that you're actually communicating well with those models, and ultimately it's not that hard. Like once you get the hang of it, you will get a feeling for like what information the model needs versus what information is extra and not really beneficial, right? And it's really striking that line. It's like, how do I manage the context that I'm given this AI model, right? So it can do its task effectively, but I'm also not overburdening it with too much information. Example, if I need to maybe draft a client email, I wouldn't want to put all of my medical records about that case, right, into the prompt and then ask it about it, right? Versus, obviously, if I'm trying to, let's say, prepare a medical chronology, obviously I would need to provide all those medical records, otherwise it wouldn't be able to do the job. So it's just really making sure that you provide enough information to the model for it to complete the task, but don't overdo it. I mean, ultimately, that's a fine line.
Yeah. Okay. So let's break down that example for a second. So
Yeah.
let's say you want a medical chronology created out of from your client's records. What is the best way of approaching that then? Because you said you don't want to dump them all into a prompt and everything. So how would you break it down?
If it's a very simple case, let's say it's, I don't know, 100 pages of medical records, you can potentially honestly do it in one single prompt, and you have quite let's say high confidence that the model will do a good job, right? If you're working with a more complex case, let's say 3,000 pages of medical records, then you need to understand the limitations of the models that you're working with, right? What we've seen, for example, with Gemini is that after, I would say like 300, 400 pages per prompt, right, per chat, its hallucination rate starts increasing, right? Not only in terms of, let's say, making up information, which is actually somewhat less of an issue, it's more so errors of omission, which a lot of times people don't think about. It's, I have supplied this, let's say, 1,000-page medical records to Gemini. How do I actually make sure that he's included all of the treatments, right? And that's the biggest issues with big records. Because ultimately, the model is trying to do its best to summarize, right? But it has a limited as well output window, so it cannot summarize necessarily everything if it's a very long record. So what I would do there is I would just simply break the record up, right? If it's multiple files, it's obviously easier. If it's one single file, you can just really break it, for example, by dates, and then process those records individually in separate chats, right? Making sure that you don't pollute the same chat with multiple records. So in separate chats, get those individual summaries, and almost you have like this bit, let's say, of a funnel, right? You start with a lot of those like medical records, very big amount of information. You then condense it to summaries of individual records, right? And then in a separate prompt, you would then, for example, draft the demands or draft a chronology from that, where you just operate in, let's say, maybe with 20 pages of data, but that's already summarized data, so the model again can do a good job, right? And that way you distill it down to an actual piece of work that can be confident about and verifiable.
That's interesting. I don't think that's how we're doing it. That is interesting. One of the ways that I've seen some of our case managers do some medical summaries was through Notebook LM, and I wonder if you've got any thoughts on that.
Notebook LM is a great tool, but again, you need to understand the limitations of that. Notebook LM has a higher hallucination rate than, for example, what you'd get in Gemini app if you're using the 2.5 Pro model, right? So the 2.5 Pro is, let's say, the more advanced model. It thinks for longer, but gives you better results. 2.5 Flash is the one that's more quicker, but gives you potentially more hallucinations, less accurate. And so actually Notebook LM on the background is running 2.5 Flash, right? That means you're not necessarily getting the best intelligence per se. And it's great for discovery, right? So if, let's say, you have, let's say, all of your medical records, police reports, etc. on the case, you can put all of them in Notebook LM, right? Maybe potentially share it with your team, right? Have it as a bit of like operating hub for that particular case, and ask it specific questions, right? For essentially, let's say, supercharged control F, right? That is an amazing use case of that. When you try, for example, to generate the timeline, and the sidebar has like the reports, right? You try to generate the timeline of that case with that. a lot of times based on my testing, it would omit stuff or it would hallucinate stuff, right? And in that summary as well, it's not necessarily verifiable. You can just click on a particular fact and see where exactly it got the information from. So for comprehensive chronologies that you can trust, I wouldn't use NotebookLM. I would follow the process they have just explained, just because as well, at each point in those individual summaries, what you can do is you can click on any response or any like portion of the text, and it will provide a citation to the actual piece of text in the document where it sources that. And what I would do is almost divert, let's say, from the concept of, let's say, a single case manager per file. That's a bit more advanced, right? Like a single case manager per file. And as the records are coming in, have a specialized person almost work in a conveyor belt style, which would be processing those medical records, making sure that the medical summaries are correct. And when it comes time to drafting, those medical summaries already would be in your case management system, and the legal assign then can just take those, know that the information there is good, and don't have to verify with the original records.
It's interesting you say that because that's exactly how we're setting up our medical summary agent that we're building out. That we just started yesterday, but I mentioned to you before that we're having to do it one record at a time. So as a record comes in, it does it. And so it starts to kind of build to this overall template that we've built out. So that's really interesting. Something that I really like Notebook LM for is to like prepare for mediations or depots. What I'll do is I'll put information in it, and I'll use the podcast function where it just has a kind of like a refresher. And the question I have though is, do you think that there's going to be a time where the podcasts that people listen to are just going to be AI podcasts that are created from things like that?
Well, if you go on YouTube, there are channels with 100K subscribers that are fully AI generated.
Yeah.
You may not certainly know it, right? But I guess if you've worked with AI voice models, you will be able to understand that it is AI. So I mean, there's this well theory of like that internet theory, which pretty much says that, let's say, 90% of the internet is all bots, right? And the humans should represent a small minority of it. I cannot say if that's true or not, but I think definitely not, for sure, 100%. And right now, like the concept of like you see it, you believe it is no longer relevant. I can create a deepfake video of anybody doing anything at this point in time, with sound, with video, whatever.
Yeah. So I think it's pretty obvious at this point for people listening or watching that you like Gemini. Gemini as your preferred model. What's the reason you prefer something like Gemini over something like Claude or ChatGPT?
So, a few things here. First of all, let's start, I guess, with the most basic. Also, not necessarily always relevant for plaintiff personal injury lawyers. We only really work with personal injury. Gemini is fully HIPAA compliant, right? In Google Workspace, if you get it through Google Workspace, you could just accept a BAA in 3 simple steps, and now the platform is fully HIPAA compliant. ChatGPT, no Claude offers that unless you're like super enterprise. Right. Then second, if you're already using Google Workspace, it is included. And so again, the whole, let's say, part of change management of making sure your people actually use it becomes easier because you don't have to provision new accounts. They just literally go to their Gmail, click on the like 9 dots, click Gemini, tada, they're there. And then lastly, in terms of quality, I guess somewhat more subjective, but I do find that it hallucinates less and it can process records better. So its document processing capabilities, especially for things like medical records, is superior compared to ChatGPT and Claude. It just seems to understand, let's say, especially if it's like a badly scanned PDF or similar, and it understands better compared to those models. But really, it's all of them are quite similar. But those are the advantages. I feel like Gemini is a bit on top. What we also need to understand is that Claude recently released a new model. ChatGPT recently released a new model, which is a router. But okay, that's a separate story. Gemini 2.5, the base model, also there has been revisions, has been released in March of this year. And so it's like already 6 months old. And so Gemini 3 is coming. I'm very bullish on that, and I hope that it will be better than the competition as well.
No, we're going to find out very quickly. I'm going to change gears a little bit, and I want to
Uh,
ask you about something. I'm going to show you
Tyson,
this.
just maybe just before as well, we continue. Like I have a great actually report. I can also share screen share if you want.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
do that. That's
yeah.
absolutely.
So sorry to cut you there.
No, you're good. But I want to ask you about this article. I talked about this on our live show yesterday, but I want to talk to you about it. And this is the anti ChatGPT, which the title's stupid. To ignore that. But
Yeah.
Thomson Reuters multi-agent system slashes 20-hour tasks to 10 minutes. And they talk about this new thing where it's going to do research and all that kind of stuff. And this says, RAG was the start, but doesn't go deep enough. And the reason I wanted to ask you about it, when we were chatting beforehand, either you or Max, your partner, your co-founder, one of you had mentioned the fact that people they got this kind of like FOMO, so they'll go pay for a product, kind of like that. You all didn't specifically mention that, but
Yeah.
I what I thought was kind of interesting is that it appeared to be like they just built out an AI agent or a workflow that goes and does legal research. This is basically what it does. And what I wanted to ask you about was a couple things. Was the what are your thoughts on people that go and are about them going and not necessarily the people themselves, but just the idea of going out and paying for something like this that I think can just be built out by someone like you that can build out like workflows. So I just
Yeah.
because it seems like this is probably like an overpriced workflow that you could probably just build yourself for a fraction of the cost.
I'll go even a step further and say you don't build it, you actually just use the app and use it well.
Okay.
Right. And the reason for that is like I looked over the last like 3 months, I've been on an AI research spree. I have been looking at all, let's say, legal AI vendors, specifically in personal injury space. Have also built workflows myself with make.com, connecting directly, let's say, to the APIs of these platforms. And what I realized is that also the output in some of them was sometimes marginally better, sometimes actually worse than using the app. It didn't justify the cost, right? It didn't justify paying $300 for a case unless it's like a very high stakes litigation case. Okay, I understand, right? But let's say like 80% of routine personal injury cases. It didn't justify the cost of paying $300 per case with an annual subscription where you can do the same thing, maybe spend 5-10 minutes more, but then you're just paying $20 per month per user for your Google Workspace subscription already, right? What ultimately happens is that with a lot of these tools, human verification is still needed. Whatever legal AI vendor tells that their product is hallucination free is that's complete BS, right? It's based on AI, so ultimately just like AI itself, generative AI, its architecture is ultimately somewhat creative, right? It's replicated patterns and it's not deterministic, meaning that you cannot get 100% accuracy. And so would you rather, let's say, pay $20 per user tool and do manual review, or pay $300 per case and still do manual review? The what I would also say is an issue I would say with some of these tools that are like some very specific or let's say integrated directly into the workflow that still need manual verification is that instead of giving your team and investing in your team and giving them a meta skill that they can use not only for that particular narrow task, let's say of medical record summarization, but they can go and ask it to explain a concept to a client. They can go and ask it to, I don't know, create an image for a marketing campaign. They can go and learn a new concept by themselves, right, with a tool. Instead of investing in your team, right, and giving them meta skill, which will serve for their career, you're paying this provider and providing maybe like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 sits to the lucky ones in the organization who get to work with it. So I would say there is use in those tools, but again, enterprise level, right? Or if you, let's say you said, okay, like I run a 20-person firm, I don't want to grow anymore, I just want to make it more efficient. Okay, maybe makes sense as well, right? But if you're trying to grow, keep it simple, make sure you actually adopt technologies that drive real value, tangible value as soon as possible and require minimal maintenance, right? Because what we also need to understand is even if you hire an engineer to build a more complex system like this, it also needs maintenance, right? So I think practicality is probably the the most desirable skills I want to have, let's say, law firm owners to have when it comes to all of this.
So you built, you and Max have built out Swans. So for those of anyone interested, swans.co. And we offer sustainable and scalable solutions. And so like there's like you build out these systems and everything for people, but we offer sustainable and scalable solutions where marketing consultants fall short. That's from the website and everything. But you definitely do more than that. By 2030, our goal is to empower 10,000 law firms across North America to double the revenue. That's amazing. I think that's a wonderful vision and everything. I do wonder what got you into doing this specifically with law firms. That's because I
Yeah.
mean, like, usually there's some sort of something that triggers someone going into a specific industry. So I wonder what about law firms and specifically PI firms?
Well, originally, I would say my response would be somewhat anticlimactic. It was a bit by an accident. I wanted to do back like 6 years ago. I wanted to do automation, right? I really got excited by tools like Make.com and Zapier, where I could build workflows with little to no coding and provide actual business value without waiting for, let's say, a month of a Python engineer, building that on your back end. And I got very excited by that. I wanted to specialize in a particular industry, and I felt just like legal is quite an antiquated industry in terms of processes, and there was a lot of potential in there. And so that's why I started automation for lawyers, originally like my solo consulting agency. I worked with multiple clients throughout the time. I actually then joined a law firm in the UK, settlement agreement solicitors. Then they actually became a partner there later, um, and um, and for them essentially built out their full CRM and case management system, bringing the company from 5 people to now more than 40, and the company having more than, I believe, like 6,000 now 5-star reviews on Trustpilot. It was a very specific, let's say, niche of employment law in the UK. But what I think that showed me is that there is a huge opportunity for more entrepreneurial spirit within legal, right? The law firm owner that founded the firm was actually an entrepreneur, right? An entrepreneur that previously ran actually a few consumer brands. They partnered with the legal director, opened up the firm because they saw there's just an opportunity again in the market where not good enough customer service was delivered in that particular niche. And so he decided to form the company and reimagine the process. Like, okay, forget about how law firms are doing this. I want to actually understand like what drives customer value, what's actually valuable, and let's design the process around that. So we designed the full system. The company grew. Later then partnered up with Max to reform automation fullers into Swans. And the reason that we chose to go for personal injury is I feel like that's the most as well somewhat entrepreneurial part within the legal ecosystem. It's one that's a bit more competitive and one that's a bit more open to trying out new things, right? And so I feel like that's just the natural first step into making an impact in this industry and almost making sure that we help a few firms a lot, right, to actually drive impact and doing that almost like brute force this industry into providing better customer service, being more customer centric, and as well being more entrepreneurial by using technology and AI, everything we do.
I think you're absolutely right about the PI space. It has been more entrepreneurial. I do think that that's changed substantially over the last decade or so, where it's shifted quite a bit. I still think it's PI is probably still predominantly the most entrepreneurial of the entire legal space, but it definitely has changed quite a bit, which I think is good. I think it's good for the legal space in general. But I think you're really interesting because you're different from a lot of automation people and AI people. It's funny because they are different, but you're now sort of both. You have to sort of be both. You can't just be automation or AI. You got to be both. But what makes you different, though, is that you have been inside the inner workings of a law firm and help build the systems and processes, which makes you substantially different, I will say, because you have to understand how the legal space works. You really do have to have a understanding of the inner workings. And with that, what are some of those basic maybe AI agent workflows or workflows in general or automations in general that you think that law firms should have? Like every law firm should have them.
Every law firm is a tough question, just because I feel like, again, at different stages of your growth, you will need different things, right? And that's
I
why that's
knew the
the
moment I
toughest
said
part.
every law firm would be every law firm max, but okay.
It's like if you are a solo team, like what you need, you don't need Clio. Like you need to hire your next paralegal, your first paralegal, right? You need that, and you can work on an Excel. That's fine, right? When you're three, okay, get a case management system, right? So I can talk about like, let's say, a few major things we are working on, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think so. Let's hear that.
Okay, so I mean, obviously, one that we've been talking about now, especially relevant now, is I would say just AI adoption. Making sure that your team not building some crazy AI workflows, which there's a place for that again, once you've covered the basics, but actually making sure that each one of your team members adopts this technology, is comfortable with it, and uses on a daily basis, right? That is really where the power comes. And that's why I feel like where a lot of these legal AI vendors ultimately fall short is because they provide this great tool, they do a few onboarding sessions, and then that's it, right? What we found is even if we do group sessions, we still need to jump one-on-one or at least department level with our clients and actually walk people through, make them feel comfortable with the technology, try out a few things with them to get the ball rolling, and then to check in on a periodic basis. So AI adoption would be one thing. Another big one for growing firms is actually analytics, right? I think a lot of case management and CRM systems in the legal space don't do an amazing job at providing great analytics. Things like, for example, in your case management systems, on average, how fast are cases progressing from stage to stage, right? If you're growing your firm, I would love to know the information to understand where are the bottlenecks, and are the bottlenecks due to, let's say, the client not providing information, to the defense being too slow, or is it actually an internal holdup that I can solve for, right? That's critical information I need to be able to make the decision. Things like, for example, especially if you're working in PI, one thing that struck me is that a lot of firms, even somewhat substantially large firms, don't have proper financial forecasting and analytics, right? So understanding when is cash flow coming in, making sure that data is synced to your case management system where you have, let's say, projected settlement values, right? Understanding how much is coming in every month to, in the future, to be able to make a hard decision, for example, right? Not only that, but also actually understanding how much value is your team generating every month. Because obviously in PI, like you start working on the case, you invest essentially for 9 months into your team doing the work, but then you only see the result. If you look at your books and you're growing fast, like you want to, like you will think that you are unprofitable, but it's not really the case, right? Because you're now building value for those future cases. And so having some kind of infrastructure to be able to, again, take the information from the case management system, process it in aggregate, right, and display the nice analytics dashboard is very important. And obviously all the stuff on the CRM side of things like intake, speed to lead, obviously a lot of big things there. And then we would say, let's say optimizing your CRM and case management capabilities, right? A lot of firms are already using great tools, but they're not fully maximizing, right? Maybe you're not using conditional logic within your document templates and you have 200 templates sitting in your case management system where you could only just have 30, which obviously complicates maintenance and errors, whatever. Or maybe, for example, your case management system actually has the ability to apply task lists automatically when the case goes from one stage to another. Again, that's very useful. You can run analytics on those task completions later. You can make sure your SOP, you don't need that many SOPs because pretty much everything is in your case management system. CRM side of things, again, automation on that front, making sure that, again, data is properly organized and displayed within that. And then we would go into, let's say, more advanced stuff, such as creating custom automations with May.com, Zapier, those more advanced platform AI agents, etc., etc. But as you can see, there are like a lot of basic steps that there is more benefit to getting them right rather than immediately say jumping into the most advanced flashy workflow. Because if you don't have good data, if you don't have good processes, like that will not work.
So I was quickly trying to pull up the data from one of our dashboards because you mentioned the log jams, and there was we actually went through this yesterday during our quarterly meeting, and I was very, very surprised. I don't know what the type of chart is called, but it's those charts where it kind of flows. You take the name of our charts it's source versus phase. And so where are all of our clients coming from? And then what phase of the case is it in? In one of our phases, we have case on hold, and it could be for a variety of reasons. And it could be The client's not got us information. We can't get a hold of the client. Like there's things like that where cases on hold until, we figure out whatever's going on. And the biggest source for case on hold is client referrals. So current clients or clients that have referred us cases. That is the biggest source for case on hold. And it's interesting, without this chart, I guess we could do the chart another way, but it is that one was kind of, you've got like it kind of connects each other and it's like
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
wavy and stuff. I don't know the name of it.
Waterfall, I guess.
Is that what it's called? Is a waterfall chart?
So it's sourced against, let's say, in your case management system,
Yeah,
sourced
exactly.
against stage.
Yep.
Probably just a matrix chart, I guess.
It's kind of
Yeah.
interesting, but so it's interesting though. It's like, wow. So it really has me thinking. Maybe we need to reassess whether or not we want to devote as much time to try and get current client referrals.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think, that necessarily we're going to stop trying to do that, but all right, whenever a client refers a case, maybe we just look at it a little bit harder as to whether or not we want to take that case. But it's interesting when it comes to that data though. So I'm glad you mentioned that because it triggered that memory from yesterday because that the data is so important.
Look, if you're running a law firm is a business. You need to think like a business owner, right? As a law firm owner, you're not an attorney. You're a business owner, right? And so you need good data to make good business decisions, right? Finance sides, things like this. I'll probably go in further. I would say, like, hey, let's analyze, for example, average settlement values for the different sources. And maybe like those client referrals are the lowest one on the list. You're like, okay, maybe we shouldn't take any client referrals, right? If you don't have the data, you cannot make the decision, and then you just fly in and drug pretty much in your business.
Yeah, and people definitely need to know that one. That's one that you definitely need to know. Where are your highest value cases? That's no doubt for sure. Is there going to be a point where when we talk about AI, that AI and agents are it's just synonymous? It's just like AI is just AI agents. Like, is there going to be a point where that happens?
Maybe. I would say there are already I think an agent, right? It's like we need to understand what is an agent, right? An agent, I would say, is let's say the capability of a system to make decisions by itself without supervision, right? And so even if you look at, for example, let's say Gemini 2.5 Pro, ChatGPT 5 extended thinking, it is a somewhat agentic system already, right? When you ask it a question, it reasons about it, right? It makes certain conclusions, goes one path versus the other, right? It has, let's say, chain of thought, which you can actually see in the software as well, right? So it is already somewhat an agentic system, right? Extrapolating that further would be, okay, you just say, okay, send an email to this client about X, and then goes to your case management system, pulls up the email, drafts the email, and then actually sends it out. You give some more tools to the system. So I think those are very related. I think it will ultimately depend on, I guess, just social perception of it, the media. But I think those will be quite synonymous in the end, especially as the abilities of the systems become higher and their capabilities become more extensive, primarily through ways of integration. I meaning actually be able to do, let's say, actual work, right? Send an email, look up certain information, not just look up a website, right? Make a certain action within your CRM case management system, that will become more synonymous.
What misconceptions do you think lawyers have about agents in general?
I think most people don't know what agents are.
Just
Right.
an additional hurdle.
Okay, let's start with the fact that it's like most people don't truly understand the full capabilities of just like ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude. All right. So I think again, like it's almost like, let's cover the bases first, right? Make sure that we are comfortable using the tools. We know the capabilities of those tools. In some of our AI trainings, we even have, let's say, some younger people on the team of our clients that have used ChatGPT for their like schoolwork, for example, university, whatever. And then we hear back from them. It's like, oh, like I actually didn't know that this tool could do X, right? Like they're just like, oh, okay, I could use deep research, or like, oh, I could create this, and like this prompt would generate this result. And so I think like really there's a lot of legwork that we need to cover in there. Once we go into that, we can speak about agents, I guess, in the future, right? But it's somewhat more experimental. Unless again your team is fully adopted AI already, you have your systems on point, you have your data on point, you have analytics on point. I feel like agents are a distraction.
Yeah. But I'm going to stay on agents though for a second though, because I do
Sure.
think that it can be a distraction for the people that are just kind of, they don't have some sort of integrated system with it and all that.
Yeah.
But early on, when agents were starting to develop and become a thing, it was a lot of what I was seeing was you're kind of building teams of agents where like they supervise each other and everything like that. And I wonder if that's something you would agree to ways of setting it up, or do you think that that is a flawed way of thinking now?
Well, that I would probably even call more so like agent swarm,
Agent
right?
swarm?
Swarm, yeah. I think
Okay.
that's the term that is being used if you look at like NA10 YouTube videos. Agent swarm meaning like it's essentially a group or a team of agents working together, right? I would say how would I define, let's say, an agent in a more I guess simple sense is just like a system that can make decisions and then can use tools, right, to execute its goal. And so for that, I wouldn't necessarily say that a team of agents is necessary or a team of those systems is necessary. It could be one of them.
Yeah, because as we've built out more of our agents and everything, it does seem like it's more linear than having this like stacked pyramid of a team of agents. Because the way early on it was okay, so you got this team leader, and then there's teams underneath it and teams underneath it. And I'm not saying that it's wrong or right, but I can just tell you the way we built ours out, it's more of a linear thing based on other triggers, not necessarily based on supervisors and team leaders and the worker bees and all that. It's the setup is way different.
It's a workflow. It's a workflow, right? It's AI augmented workflow. It's not necessarily, let's say, an agent, an AI assistant you can ask anything. It is designed to execute a specific mission, and it is operating within the boundaries of that, which I think is the right way to approach as well, ultimately automation at this point in time. Because again, you can, for example, interact with, ChatGPT agent, right? It has the built function there now. But the results you're going to get will be very variable because there's still a lot of, because AI hallucinates, because AI is not deterministic. There's still a lot of opportunities for error. And so I don't think it's just like it's there yet to consistently be delivering value in those very highly agentic systems compared to more narrowly scoped automations that use AI, right? AI augmented workflows.
I'm very hesitant to ask you this question because I don't want you to say something other than what I'm using. But when it comes to build out agent workflows, what is your preferred system to use?
There are a few on the market. I would say NA10 is quite
Thank you.
popular.
Thank you for saying
I
that
think
because I was afraid you were going to say something else, and I love N8N. I think N8N is great, but I know there's others out there, but I think it is, to me it's the most intuitive, but it also has to me the most features.
yeah, it's somewhat, let's say, more technically focused, and again, that's why we really only like deploy it for like more advanced customers per se, right? Or like where we progress some more. One thing there that I kind of dislike is just the fact it doesn't have a proper like cloud hosting option. Like if you use a cloud version, by Netan, it's hosted in German servers in Europe. If you use a self-hosted version, obviously you can use it whenever, but there's some more technicalities in setting it up and maintaining that than just, let's say, sign up for Zapier or Make.com. Yeah.
Interesting, because I mean I didn't even notice. It's one of those things over here I just didn't notice at all. That's really interesting.
Well, check that.
Now I want to go and look and see for sure. Is there anything that you are, because it seems like technology is it's changing so rapidly, and it seems like there's something new that comes out every single week, and you kind of have the shiny object syndrome. But is there anything that you've seen out that you are super, super excited about? That you're like, oh my gosh, like this tool is just amazing.
I get those moments through marketing copy, and then I try it out, and then I have disillusionment. It's especially we talk about like specific, like vendors coming into the market and promising the world. What I think ultimately the last, doing this for the last years taught me is that simple systems, boring systems are the ones that actually deliver value. Right. And as a tech-minded person, I'm very drawn to finding the latest and greatest. But then when you actually put it to practice, when you think about security considerations, I know HIPAA compliance, where's your data stored, etc. You're like, oh, okay, like this tool is not ready, right? If I need to recommend a tool to a 100-person organization, I cannot necessarily come up with like a startup that has 3 employees on LinkedIn and tell them, oh yeah, use this, right? It's like I would be failing my duty as a consultant, right, to tell them that like this tool is quite new on the market, it may fail, your data may not be fully secure with them, right? So that's why I think the scope of solutions that you use for enterprise or for bigger firms just like really narrows.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. I think that's really smart. Boring is better. It's one of the things I just think boring is better. A lot of times consistency is boring, but that consistency is way better than anything else. When it comes to adoption, because let's say you're starting with a clean slate. Like you've got kind of nothing. And what, I guess, so people have like the right mindset about this. If you were to, and I guess you're never really going to be fully integrated with everything because you're always going to probably be adding on and building things to improving and changing things. But to get a fully workable system with all your workflows, and I'm not even talking about with AI, I'm just talking about just generally from a tech standpoint. What is generally, for like let's say a mid-sized firm, let's say you got,
Yeah.
10 people.
Yeah.
What is the whole timeline when it comes to from the point you start to the point you end? Is it a year? Is it a month? How long does that take?
I think again it's somewhat a hard question to ask because like there hadn't been like a clean slate for a 15-person firm. Like they're already using something.
Sure, that's a good
Right?
point. Yeah.
So and ultimately like even when I worked in house, right, in my firm, the worked there for about 3 years, and even after those 3 years of full-time work, there still was stuff to automate and like still stuff, those features to develop, right? So I feel like almost like this is somewhat infinite, right? Especially if you expand potentially into different, I know, case types. As more people join, like your problems start becoming different. I know if you go past 50 people, okay, maybe I need an HR system, right? Maybe I need a more, I don't know, expensive, powerful payroll solution, right? It's like the types of problems change. What I would say is you really need to just like start simple and take baby steps. This is the most important thing if you're going from a clean slate, unless you are working with somebody who has like already built it 1,000 times. I could just advise you on that. If you are a 10-person firm, you're starting to adopt technology, like use the most proved tools on the market. For example, the systems we like to recommend based on everything that we see generally would be, let's say, Clio Manage for case management and Lawmatics for the CRM side of things, just because those are easy enough to be able to configured and maintained by the firm staff themselves. At the same time as providing the necessary functionality for some more advanced automation, right? Like email, SMS, task lists, and Clio Manage, etc. And so take baby steps. Don't try to do too many things at once. Start with your, biggest issues like, hey, document management is the biggest issue. Okay, let's solve that. Right. Okay, now I see that, for example, my people are doing like not necessarily following the process. Okay, let's implement task lists and go step by step. But I don't think there's like it's a very simple answer to this. To build a functioning system, if you dedicate, I don't know, maybe like 10 hours per week to it, I think you can have something like an MVP ready within the first months. You'll just need to add on top of it and potentially then utilize more and more features of the software that you already have. And always check the features of the software you already paid for before trying to, I don't know, like go into Make, Zapier, and then because
Amen.
you may be surprised. You may be surprised.
Amen to that. That's for sure. I think it's a great answer. I think you answered that perfectly. The last few questions I have for you, it's more of prediction questions. And so yeah, yesterday we were having a little bit of a discussion about Neuralink and all that. Whether or not you get a chip put in your head. We were having a kind of fun conversation in the firm. And what I said was, here's the problem, right? You're gonna have some attorneys that when it's available, they'll get Neuralink, and they will have access to just gobs and gobs of data and information that, let's say you're arguing in court. I think that this is a real scenario. When the prediction I'm going to ask for you, if you think that this is actually a real world scenario, where you've got one attorney's got Neuralink, and they're going to be able to argue all this information that's in their head because they've got the chip against someone that doesn't have it, who's going to have a substantial disadvantage. And do you see a situation like that coming in the future where you're going to have attorneys with Neuralink versus attorneys without Neuralink arguing against each other in court?
I think that would be I guess, the natural progression of how things are going, right? If we look at the past few years, it's almost right now, it's like, okay, lawyers using AI versus lawyers not using AI, and banning its use in their practice, which I think is insane. Um, yeah, it will be similar, I guess, divide. Just in that particular scenario, I would say with, using it in court, question is how fast would they be able to process, let's say, the data that is coming through Neuralink? It's like, and actually make better decisions. If you actually prepared your case well, it's like, how much more can you boost your performance by having a Neuralink? I don't know. But it is scary and exciting times. I feel like we'll be coming with this. I don't think I'm putting that thing in my head, but I still want to. It's like they have been like put it essentially kill switches in cars and whatnot, right? I don't want to put a kill switch in my head. Thank you very much.
It was a scary thought. It was a scary thought. And so I'm with you on that though. A couple more questions. What skills do you think next generation lawyers should prioritize over the next few years?
Empathy and customer centricity, more so than just like say, I mean, yeah, of course, right? But with introduction of AI, I feel like being that guide for the person, for your client in distress, will be the differentiating factor. Adding more customer centricity to this profession will be the differentiating factor ultimately. Just as I have seen again in the firm in the UK, which dominated the industry because it focused on the customer. I feel like that is common for other areas and regions of law as well.
Last question. So if we zoom out 20 years from now, do you think that law is going to be similar to like aviation, where you've got pilots that are monitoring the autopilot system and all the systems going on in the gauges, where you've got agents where the firm, paralegals might be monitoring different agents doing different things, attorneys monitoring different agents doing things. Do you think it's going to shift more towards that? Is that what the legal profession is going to look like in 20 years? And again, this prediction, we don't know how much things are going to change, but I am curious what you think.
Unless, okay, so on a more strategic level, unless the judicial system changes, right? And so long as we have human judges, having human lawyers and being able to transmit emotions and stories will stay relevant, right? So I don't think that strategic part, unless, the whole judicial system gets replaced by a super intelligent AI, which I don't think is happening. I think that will stay the case. For more, let's say, mundane work, meaning, analyzing medical records, drafting responses, etc. That part I feel like will get closer to what you're saying, just as we're seeing now in coding, right? I look at people using Claude Code for, it's like an AI coding solution pretty much, and Copilot pretty much for coders, and they have their computer with like 3 different chats. Like one is writing a new feature, another is running a unit test, and the third one is I don't know, debugging an issue, right? And they just switch in between them quite quickly, right? And just while waiting, they work on the other one. So I feel like that is a possibility, but I don't think that will be for, let's say, the more actual strategic work, or again the primary function of the law, which I feel will be like that guide.
All right. In 20 years, you're going to play this back and see if you were right. Very good. Martin, thank you so much. If anyone is interested, go to swans.co. If they want to reach out to you personally, is there some sort of social media?
Hello at swans.co. or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Martin Kravchenko. Yep.
Love it. Thank you, Martin, for doing this. I look forward to working with you at the workshop in Nashville, at the conference at MaxwellCon. If you want tickets, go to maxwellcon.com. Martin, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Tyson.